She was one game away from a clean escape. She never got it. And what happened after that missed game is the reason a Canadian tennis stadium started sounding like a national holiday. Somewhere in that crowd, 10,000 people were about to watch a 21-year-old make a decision. Most professional athletes spend their entire careers avoiding the decision to keep going when every signal in her body was screaming stop. But before we get to the ankle, before we get to the medical timeout, before we get to the sound of an entire section going silent at the exact same second, we need to go back to the moment nobody was paying attention. Because the loudest stories always start quietly. Picture Washington first, not Toronto yet. Washington, where a young player named Alex walked into a tournament carrying no real weight of expectation and walked out carrying a trophy she had never touched before in her career. A WTA 500 title. The kind of win that doesn't just add a line to a resume. It changes how an entire sport looks at you. One week you're promising, the next week you're dangerous. That shift happened to Alex in the span of a single tournament, and normally this is where an athlete disappears for a while. Ice baths, rest, a quiet celebration with people who understand exactly how hard that trophy was to get. Instead, Alex barely had time to feel it. She was on a plane within days, landing in Toronto with a body that hadn't recovered and a target that had just gotten significantly bigger. Hold on to that detail. It matters more than it seems right now because everything you're about to watch happens to a competitor who was already running on empty before the real danger even started. Here's the part that should have been impossible. Before Alex played a single point in Toronto, before anyone had any proof of how her body would hold up under a second brutal stretch in a row, her very first match was already sold out. Not the final, not some marquee showdown between two legends everyone expected to collide, an opening round, gone, every seat. People inside the tournament were reportedly using language behind the scenes that hinted they hadn't fully planned for what was building around one player. And this wasn't some overseas media outlet inflating a story from a distance. This was the tournament itself publishing a preview describing what they expected to hit the city because of her arrival. When the organizers start writing about a crowd before the crowd has physically shown up, something unusual is already in motion. Then the crowd actually arrived, and big doesn't begin to describe it. Broadcasters stopped mid-sentence to comment on the noise. Flags weren't scattered here and there in polite little pockets. They filled entire sections, rippling in unison every time she won a point, every time she glanced up, every time the match tilted even slightly in her favor. Her opponent that round wasn't some easy stepping stone either. A proven, experienced competitor stood across the net. But the atmosphere didn't feel like two athletes on a tennis court. It felt like an entire country had temporarily relocated into a Canadian arena. Alex won in straight sets, and then she did something that told you everything about what was forming between her and that crowd. She turned toward the stands after the win and asked for more noise. Not thanked them, not waved and walked off, asked for more. A player who had just won, requesting an even louder response from the people who'd shown up for her. Small moment, massive signal. But momentum like that never stays simple for long, does it? It always demands more, and the tournament kept raising the stakes. Her next opponent brought a fan base of her own, a resume of her own, a quiet confidence built from years on tour. And once again, before that match had even begun, word was already spreading, sold out again. A pattern was forming, and patterns are dangerous, because every pattern eventually invites pressure. Each win Alex collected wasn't just a win anymore. It became a promise to thousands of people that the next round would matter even more, that the flags would multiply, that the noise would climb higher, that the stakes would tighten. She delivered again. Another straight-set victory. Another moment shared with the crowd. And by now, the way people were describing this tournament had shifted entirely. A major sports network stopped calling it a tennis event and started calling it something closer to a cultural celebration, a festival that happened to have a scoreboard attached. When the broadcasters covering the tournament reach for that kind of language, you're not watching hype anymore. You're watching a phenomenon getting documented as it happens. And this is exactly where the story should have stayed simple. Win, celebrate, repeat. It didn't. Her next opponent was an experienced American, someone who had faced hostile crowds before and never blinked. And for the first time in this entire run, Alex found herself somewhere unfamiliar behind. Not cruising, not controlling, searching, adjusting, chasing a match that wasn't going her way. She clawed her way out of it and stole the first set anyway. Fine, manageable. The story could have stayed contained right there. It didn't stay contained. In the second set, something happened that silenced 10,000 people faster than any missed shot ever could. Her ankle gave out, right there in front of everyone. Medical staff sprinting onto the court. The match frozen. And the stadium went quiet in that specific, sickening way stadiums go quiet when nobody knows if what they just witnessed is minor or career-altering. Try to sit inside that moment for a second. Imagine flying across an ocean, waiting weeks for this exact match, and watching the player you traveled for wince in pain while trainers tape her ankle in front of the entire arena. That's not entertainment anymore. That's real, raw fear sitting in 10,000 chests at once. And here's the part that turns this from a sad footnote into something unforgettable. She didn't retire. She didn't shut it down and protect the future. She got back up. And for a stretch, it actually looked like enough. She reached a point where she was one single game away from closing the whole thing out clean, one game away from walking off a dominant winner with the danger safely behind her. She never got that game. Sensing the opening, sensing the physical toll etched into every step Alex took, her opponent ripped off 3 straight games and stole the second set entirely. Just like that, a match that could have ended cleanly was dragged into a third set, a deciding set on a damaged ankle, after Washington, after a punishing travel schedule. After doubles matches alongside a legend that had already piled extra minutes onto an already exhausted body. This is the exact scenario every athlete quietly fears, not losing because you were outplayed, but losing because your body simply runs out before your will does. Careers get built or quietly cracked in moments exactly like this one. In third sets, nobody wanted to play, in front of a crowd that came expecting a celebration and instead got a cliffhanger with real physical stakes attached. So, what do you do in that exact moment? What do you do when the people who crossed oceans for you are nervously watching you limp between points? When your opponent has all the momentum, when your own body is telling you to protect itself and shut it down? That's when you find out who someone actually is underneath the highlight reel. And Alex found out in real time, in front of everyone. She didn't collapse emotionally. She didn't let the momentum swing become permanent. Point by point, game by game, she clawed her way back into a match that had every reason to slip away from her completely. And she closed it out. Third set won. Match won. 7 straight singles victories now stacked behind her across 2 different countries, against escalating danger, held together by nothing but tape, willpower, and whatever reserves were left in a body that had already given everything it had days earlier. When it ended, there was no polished, camera-ready one-liner. Just something closer to relief, the sense of someone who had survived rather than dominated. And if you understand competitive sport at all, you know that survived is sometimes the most impressive outcome an athlete can produce, because it means the pretty version of their game wasn't available that day, and they won anyway using something raw, grit, stubbornness, flat-out refusal to lose. Now think about what this actually does to the story building around her. Before this match, the narrative was simple. Exciting young player draws enormous crowds. After this match, the narrative went somewhere deeper and far more dangerous for opponents to face. This is a competitor who doesn't quit even when her own body is actively working against her. That's the difference between being a crowd favorite and becoming a genuine threat at the top of the sport. Fans love talent. They fall in love permanently and a little obsessively with resilience. And Toronto had just watched resilience happen up close, in real time, with real consequences hanging in the air. But the tournament wasn't finished testing her. Not even close. Waiting in the next round was a name that instantly changed the weight of everything: a veteran, an Olympic gold medalist, someone with absolutely nothing left to prove on the biggest stages tennis has to offer. This isn't a rising player facing another rising player anymore. This is a battle-hardened champion stepping directly into the path of someone who had just survived a physical ordeal 48 hours earlier. Picture that stadium again. Picture the same flags rising into the air. Except this time, everyone in that crowd knows exactly what she's playing through. They saw the ankle buckle. They saw the medical timeout. They saw the third set slip away and then get dragged back through sheer stubbornness. So when she walks onto that court for round 3, the energy in the building isn't pure excitement anymore. It's something closer to collective anxiety braided together with fierce, unshakable loyalty. Because now the crowd isn't just hoping she wins. They're hoping her body simply holds together long enough to give her a fighting chance. And this is exactly why the story refuses to sit still, refuses to let you get comfortable. Every single time you think you've understood its shape, young star draws a crowd, young star wins, crowd celebrates, it mutates into something more human, more uncertain, more dangerous. First, it was about sold-out tickets and flags filling a stadium. Then it became about survival on a compromised ankle in front of 10,000 people holding their breath. Now it becomes about whether a 21-year-old body, already pushed through a title run, a punishing flight, doubles duty beside a legend, and a brutal 3-set war, can somehow hold together against a proven Olympic champion. Nobody watching knows the answer yet. That uncertainty is exactly why you can't look away, and exactly why an entire diaspora keeps buying tickets before a single point has been played. Zoom out for a second, because there's something bigger happening here than one bracket, one ankle, one tournament. What Toronto is proving, match after match, sold-out session after sold-out session, is that Alex isn't simply climbing a ranking anymore. She's becoming something tournaments quietly reorganize themselves around. Broadcasters reaching for festival language instead of sports language. Organizers publishing previews anticipating her impact before she's even stepped on the court. 10,000 people packing a night session built around her presence alone. That's not a typical trajectory for a rising player. That's the early signature of an athlete who brings an audience with her wherever she lands, not because of some manufactured marketing push, but because an entire community has found in her something worth crossing continents for. And if you trace this thread all the way back, you can see precisely how it got here. It didn't start in Toronto. It started months earlier, during a run in Miami that first forced people outside her home country to sit up and notice her. Then came a stretch of performances that quietly built her reputation as someone genuinely dangerous on any given day, someone opponents couldn't afford to underestimate anymore. Then Washington, where all of that danger finally converted into her first major breakthrough trophy. And now Toronto, where every piece of that buildup has collided into something louder, more emotional, and far more physically costly than anything that came before it. Each city adds a new layer. Each round raises the stakes a little, and every single time, the same pattern repeats itself. Packed stands, rising flags, and a young woman finding a way to win, even in moments when winning shouldn't have been possible. So here's exactly where this leaves us. Right on the edge of the next chapter, an Olympic gold medalist waiting across the net. A crowd that has already watched this player battle through real pain and come out the other side of it. Body that has now carried her through a title-winning tournament, a brutal travel schedule, doubles duty beside one of the sports legends, and a 3-set survival match, all packed into a stretch of days that would exhaust athletes twice as rested as she is right now. Nobody knows yet whether the ankle holds. Nobody knows whether the legs have anything left to give. Nobody knows whether an entire stadium's worth of belief will be enough to carry her through one more battle against someone who has already stood on an Olympic podium. What we do know is this: every single time the odds have tightened around her in this tournament, she has found a way to tighten right back. Every time this story threatened to end quietly, it exploded into something bigger instead. And that's exactly why this isn't just a tennis tournament happening in Canada. It's a live, unfinished story about how far belief, grit, and the roar of an entire community can carry one young athlete against a champion who has already conquered the biggest stage in sport. Flags are already being packed for the next session. The tickets, somehow, impossibly, are already gone again. And somewhere inside that stadium right now, a 21-year-old is taping up an ankle, staring down a gold medalist, getting ready to find out exactly how much more she has left to give.